Asa Finance today released its weekly African currencies market report that shows Ghana's Cedi recovering at 10.05 to the US dollar as the country battles inflation that surged to nearly 34% in the month of August. The Asa report forecasts further stress ahead for the Ghanaian currency, with the Cedi seen at a lower 10.5 exchange rate to the US greenback in the near term. Speaking to me now on the macros and the markets in Ghana ahead of Bank of Ghana's next policy meeting this month is Fred Duval, the CEO at African Securities in Accra. Good evening to you, Fred. Thanks for coming through on the channel again today. Let's dig further into the big economic headline on inflation. Give me a bit of on this inflation figure. What are the key contributors to the headline reading?
So the August inflation print was a combination of sustained cost pressures from both the food and non-food inflation baskets. However, the annual growth in the food basket for inflation dominated the price movement, where we had inflation in the food basket grow by 34.4% compared to a 33.6% in the non-food basket. We saw a total of about 8 subclasses in the food basket driving the food inflation, and it was spearheaded by the oils and fats and fruits and nuts, which recorded 74% and 49% inflation in the month of August, respectively.
Okay, I'm looking at this screen in terms of breaking it down, the local index in terms of inflation about 33.4%, imported index 35.2. How worried are you about the food and non-food? 34, all the parameters are running around 32% on average.
Well, I mean, I must confess it is quite worrying. And as I mentioned earlier, we see that some subclasses are even reporting inflation of around 74%. Indeed, in the food basket, the top 5 contributors to food inflation recorded a year-on-year inflation of not less than 40%. That in the non-food basket, however, was relatively better, recording with the highest contributor in the subclass, recording 46.7%. These numbers are something that we should take quite seriously, and the sooner we arrest inflation in the economy, the better it will be for everybody.
You live in the country, you're a Ghanaian. Tell me about urban and rural inflation in the country. What is the spread if I move from Accra to Cape Coast, or I go to Asifo, Asamasu, and I go all the way down to the Volta region? Sorry, I spent about 3 weeks down there across the country a couple of years, some years ago. So I'm a little bit familiar with a little bit part of the country. So all the way to the north. So what's the spread like in terms of how you folks in Accra, the big boys like yourself in Accra, are feeling the pinch of inflation away from the hinterlands?
Well, we can see that the regional distribution, it's quite clear that as you move further northwards of the country, inflation seems to be less pronounced as it is in the southern zone. The average inflation in the northern regions, that is from the Brong-Ahafo region, the northern region, Upper East, Upper West, and the Volta region, thereabouts is around 27%. But when you move further southwards, the western region, central Greater Accra, and maybe the Ashanti region, inflation is averaging around 36.2%, with the highest being in the western region. I was expecting that to be in the Greater Accra region, but Greater Accra is a comfortable third from the highest. So that is the distribution of inflation in the region, and it is. I mean, we see that the food basket is up north, further up north. So that probably may be a reason why inflation is relatively lower in the northern part of the country.
Yes, I've seen a bit of the agriculture in the northern part of the country with what the country is doing, and a few other international agencies such as the FDB supporting the food basket. So I'm worried what the macro issues were behind this unabating upward trend in Ghana inflation. Are you folks importing too much, or are you producing less locally? What's going on?
Well, you may have hit the nail right on the head. I mean, in my opinion, there are 3 main drivers of the inflation that we're experiencing in Ghana. The primary driver being the steep depreciation of the Cedi to the USD. The currency has experienced about a 40% decline this year. And since we are a very import-dependent country, this has affected the prices of all the imported goods in the country. So we're importing a lot of inflation as well. We see that the global supply chain constraints, which is a fallout of the Russian-Ukraine war and COVID, has also generally caused inflation globally. And because we keep importing stuff, then we see this being brought back home. Last but not the least, I think I've mentioned before that the low CPI levels that we experienced last year, same time last year, inflation was in the single digits. So the CPI levels were quite low. So with the increases in the CPI levels that we are seeing now, it is making the inflation numbers more pronounced because we are coming from a relatively lower base last year. So hopefully same time next year, because the CPI levels are high now, it is likely that the inflation would see inflation trending downward same time next year.
Okay, so let's talk about currency. I'm sure that's one big story now everyone is talking about. I'm sure you've seen the ASA Finance report about battling inflation, what is happening to the Cedi, what the outlook is. How is the Cedi trading today on the back of this particular news and the rest of the financial asset market? What's the outlook on the currency?
Well, I mean, the currency has been under a lot of pressure. It's no secret. I think the Cedi is the worst performing currency, second to the Sri Lankan rupee. So the Cedi has been under a lot of pressure. The good news, if there is any, is the fact that recently the government agreed a $750 million Afri-Exim loan, and that the proceeds of that have come through. So the central bank has a lot more reserves now to be able to help support the Cedi. And as the report showed, the central bank has sold about $60 million in its forward FX rate, forward FX auction, sorry. In October, we're expecting a further 1.3 billion from Cocoa Board's annual syndicated loan to buy cocoa beans. So when that $1.3 billion comes in, we expect that the central bank will be well equipped to be able to support the Cedi better. So I don't expect to see depreciation at the levels that we've seen in the past 3 months. I expect maybe a further 2 to 3% depreciation between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, things are not looking really pretty right now. Thanks for speaking with us, Fred Duval. But when things really do get better, let's be the first to know here on Arise News. Thank you so much, licensed dealer and CEO at Apakan Securities Limited in Accra, Ghana. Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening.